Climate change, environmental pollution, acidification and overfishing are greatly endangering coral reefs around the world. Without proper interventions, scientists say the Earth's coral reefs could disappear before the next century. What can we do to conserve the world's beautiful underwater tropical rainforest? In this podcast, we bring you a Chinese version of The Old Man and the Sea. We shall find out whether the old man wins his battle to restore coral reefs around a small Chinese island. Although often referred to as underwater rainforest, coral reefs are not plants. Corals are one of the oldest marine organisms, having survived on Earth for nearly 500 million years. Coral reefs are also much more than simply examples of underwater beauty. They provide food and shelter for marine life. They play a vital role in global climate regulation and buffer shorelines from the effects of hurricanes. They provide livelihoods for millions of people by offering fishing stocks and tourism opportunities. However, this beautiful but fragile ecosystem is facing unprecedented threats today.
The reef is highly vulnerable.
Bleached coral and healthy coral.
The reef has been impacted by bleaching.
More than half of the world's coral reefs are being degraded due to climate change, pollution, coastal development and overfishing. A report released by Nature Conservancy says that if everything goes on as it is, 90% of coral reefs could disappear in our lifetime. Unless we do something. It's 9 o'clock in the morning on a tiny island called Wuzhezhou off the southern coast of Hainan Island, China's southernmost province. A team of divers are getting ready for their day's mission. Wang Aimin, a retired professor from Hainan University, puts on a black diving suit with 15 kilograms of compressed gas cylinders and weights and makes some final checks before diving. This is not a leisure diving excursion. Accompanied by his diving partner, Wang Aimin dives to 28 meters, which is almost the deepest sea area where corals grow near Wuzhezhou Island. Early summer is the breeding season for fish. Wang Aimin dives this time to check the growth of underwater corals and the reproduction of fish. Professor Wang is 63 years old, an age often considered a bit old for diving. 14 years ago, this man from inland China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region began to learn how to dive in order to engage in marine protection work. Since then, diving to see corals has become his daily routine. Chinese scientists, like other scientists around the world, are racing against time to save the coral reefs. Professor Wang Aimin is one of these conservationists. Over the past 14 years, he and his team have planted tens of thousands of corals in the sea around Wuzhezhou Island. After completing the scheduled tasks underwater, Professor Wang Aimin finally comes ashore. Once out of the water, he takes out his underwater camera to share with his colleagues photos he took of the underwater scene. His excitement can't be more obvious.
This is so exciting. The corals below have recovered very well. When you swim there, the fish all swim around you, and there are so many fish there.
For a man over 60, diving is not an easy activity. Compared with younger people, older divers face higher risks. Once, while investigating the location of artificial reef deployment, Professor Wang Aimin had a sudden nosebleed, which scared his diving partner Wang Fengguo.
That time he happened to have caught a slight cold. I tried to talk him out of the idea of going diving, but he persisted. When we finally surfaced after the investigation, we took off our masks and I saw Professor Wang's nose was bleeding. He said it was okay. It was dangerous because the air pressure could not be relieved during diving.
But Wang himself simply dismisses the dangers out of hand.
There was one time I was underwater and the breathing tube of my mask suddenly came off. I was not scared at all. I just picked it up and reattached it.
Although retired, the professor never associates his age with being old. He believes that the reason some people think he is old is mainly due to the fact that diving is not yet so popular in China, and elderly divers are still rare. The professor takes pride in the fact that among most of his researching peers, he could dive.
In China, among all the people who study the ocean, how many scientists can dive? How many professors can dive? You can easily count it.
Among the joys of his diving excursions, Professor Wang Aimin said, is to see the corals in the sea grow bigger, the colourful tropical fish increase in number, and the marine ecological environment around Wuzhezhou Island is improving. Wuzhezhou Island is an irregular butterfly-shaped island located southwest of Sanya city of Hainan province. This tropical island has an area of only 1.48 square kilometers, but it is one of the most popular diving destinations in China. Wang Fengguo is a diving instructor at Wuzhezhou Island.
Originally, when we went into the water, we would see schools of fish. Some were made up of hundreds of fish swooshing past you. But later, shoals of fish that we ran into decreased, and the size of the fish schools also decreased.
The degradation of the region's coral reefs and the decrease in fish numbers made Ding Feng, the person in charge of the Wuzhezhou Island scenic area, very anxious. He called in at the then Sanya Ocean and Fisheries Bureau for help, hoping to find some sort of magic trick to return the number of fish.
We went to the director of the bureau at the time, and he said the Ministry of Agriculture had just launched a marine ranch project that year, and Professor Wang Aimin was recommended to us.
So Professor Wang Aimin, who used to specialize in shellfish farming at Hainan University, got to work with Wuzhezhou Island. As he had done preliminary research on marine ranches, he was invited to design and build an underwater ranch around the tiny island. Since 2009, Wang and his team have been developing marine ranching along Hainan's coast.
There are many coral reefs near the Wuzhezhou Island, but many coral reefs were having big problems, such as coral bleaching, and the coverage and health rate of living corals were very poor. It was our hope to introduce some measures to restore the coral reefs.
In China at that time, even among the oceanography community, most experts did not know much about building marine ranches and restoring coral reefs. Professor Wang Aimin's initial team consisted of only 4 members, himself included. But Wang decided that he was just going to do it and take care of the other stuff later.
We just wanted to give it a try, and we thought that it would be done in a couple of days' time. None of us expected that it would take off and last 14 years right up to today.
Coral reef restoration is a global challenge. Wang's specialism is shellfish farming, so there was no talk of practical experience in developing marine ranching. He and his team tried to get advice from various sources, including experts from China and abroad. They went to Japan to learn related technologies. They also invited coral reef restoration experts from Newcastle University in the UK over to check the situation.
I accompanied them diving and inspected all the nearby corals. The British professor mentioned one issue, that there were too few fish around. He suggested that we use artificial reefs to attract fish and restore fishery resources. After that, the coral reefs will be able to recover better.
The sites for artificial reefs must be on a hard seabed. Although there are measuring instruments to help, Wang Aimin wants to be 100% sure. He must dive to the seabed himself to check for a suitable location for placing artificial reefs.
I guess I'm different from others. They use instruments to measure whether there is silt underneath and whether the reef will sink after it is deployed. I love to use my hands to dig at the bottom of the sea. If the seabed is hard and I can dig, then this is the spot of my choice.
From 2010 to 2017, Wang's team placed more than 1,600 artificial reefs in the waters of Wuzhezhou Island. It takes time for corals to grow on the artificial reefs naturally. Wang Aimin felt that he couldn't wait. Can there be a way to speed up the growth cycle of corals? And in addition to attracting fish, can artificial reefs grow corals more directly? In 2017, he discovered a special material by chance which smoothed his path towards the fast growth cycle of corals.
There are a lot of volcanic rocks on Hainan Island. They typically have many holes. They look to me so much like coral rocks. So I chose some and put them on the seabed. These volcanic rocks serve as a base for naturally propagated coral larvae to attach to, and they can grow in large quantities after attaching to the rocks.
Altogether, Wang's team put underwater 8 tons of volcanic rocks over a span of time, which opened up a new chapter of coral reef restoration on Wuzhezhou Island. But in the eyes of other people, including his diving coach Wang Fengguo at that time, the professor was a kind of weird old guy whose mind was preoccupied with throwing rocks into the water all day long.
We were thinking, what's the use of these things? And he replied, what's the use? Well, you will know soon enough when you see it for yourself.
2 years later, the volcanic rocks were covered with thick attachments, such as barnacles and shells, and the very thing Professor Wang was expecting, corals. He has proved himself right. To use the good professor's own words, what should grow on them has grown on them.
Now, as the years have passed, the entire area has been covered with corals.
You're listening to Footprints. We will continue the story of the Chinese scientists' endeavour to bring corals back to the sea near a small Chinese island after this break. Professor Wang Aimin's experiment has achieved some progress. Corals are growing on the volcanic rocks in the Coral Ranch, but risks are many on the seabed. Wuzhezhou Island is prone to typhoons, which is a great test for corals, especially fragile new corals. Sometimes when a typhoon hits, it stirs up the seabed like a huge blender and leaves behind large quantities of broken coral branches scattered here and there. The sight never fails to distress Wang Aimin, who has spent so much time and patience growing the corals. Can these broken coral branches continue to grow? With that question in mind, Wang and his colleagues set out to use these broken branches to carry out underwater afforestation, which is also an internationally recognized effective way for coral reef restoration.
We collect the coral branches that were knocked down by typhoons or broke off due to other factors, and transplant them to underwater coral nurseries. When these coral branches grow to a size suitable for transplantation, they are transported to the seabed, where they'll be tied to the coral planting reefs prepared in advance.
A year after the transplantation, the team was thrilled to find that the average survival rate of the carefully selected 5 types of coral has exceeded 90%. Their growth rate even exceeded Wang Aimin's expectations.
A 5 to 7 centimeter long broken branch can grow to a disc-shaped coral with a diameter of about 20 centimeters in 1 year. After 2 or 3 years, it can actually grow to a diameter of about 1.5 meters. The growth rate is super fast. I used to think that the limit of coral growth was 1 or 2 centimeters a year.
Then there's the threat of the long-spined starfish, which is the #1 killer of corals. It will eat away the coral polyps wrapped in the exoskeleton. Wang Fengguo, the diving coach, and his colleagues have been injured many times in order to get rid of these natural enemies of corals.
Long-spined sea stars are like hedgehogs. They're also highly poisonous. You don't want to catch them directly with your hands. You can only use iron wire and iron rods to pick them out.
In recent years, Wang Aimin also guided the deployment of some abandoned fishing boats as artificial reefs under the sea near Wuzhezhou Island. Before each deployment, Wang Aimin would instruct the construction workers to carefully remove all the oil stains and paint on the boats and dismantle all internal parts to prevent chemicals from polluting the sea. As expected, these underwater ship reefs have become the fish breeding and nursery grounds during the breeding season.
We now have more than 20 ship reefs there, and they are very large. I also like to dive there. Sometimes you can see a lot of fish, especially in July and August, when the fish grow very big. They will be all around you. They won't leave even if you try to chase them away. I feel more than excited because that is an achievement.
Since the first batch of artificial fish reefs were put into use in 2011, the Sanya Wuzhezhou Island National Marine Ranch Demonstration Zone has put in a total of 80,000 cubic meters of artificial reefs and ship reefs underwater. They transplanted more than 10 species of corals, totaling more than 10,000 plants, with coral survival rates exceeding 90%. The coverage rate of coral reefs around the island has increased from less than 15% to 29%, nearly doubling the previous coverage rate. In 2023, an underwater monitoring system was put in place in the Wuzhezhou Island area. When Wang Aimin is not on the island, he will turn on his mobile phone whenever he has time to check on his precious corals and fish.
Do you see the big grouper? See how beautiful it is. It looks right at home, doesn't it?
In recent footage, a giant wild grouper with a body length of more than 1 meter turned up, which was such a nice surprise for Professor Wang Aimin. Compared with 2010, the number of fish in the waters of Wuzhezhou Island has increased by 2 to 3 times, with a total of more than 300 species of fish. Wang Fengguo, who has been working on Wuzhezhou Island for nearly 20 years, also notices the return of the fish.
Once we were deploying artificial reefs, a ray suddenly jumped about 3 or 4 meters high out of the water from behind our deployment ship. The construction of the coral ranch seems to be very effective. Now in the morning, if you take a speedboat around the island, you might see a sudden ripple on the sea surface. If you slow down your boat and get close, you will see a school of fish below.
The increase in fish schools has also attracted more visitors. In recent years, new marine life has continued to visit this sea area, and sea turtles and dolphins are not uncommon. One morning in September last year, Zhang Zheng, a staff member of Wuzhezhou Island, ran into an unfamiliar guest.
We encountered this creature just outside the shallow water area. It looked a bit like a fur seal, and yet it also looks like a seal. Anyway, it was quite cute, swimming leisurely here and there.
After identification, it was nailed down to a spotted seal. The spotted seal is a first-class protected wild animal in China. This is the first time that a spotted seal has been found in the waters of Sanya.
这几天，一只斑海豹出现在了海南三亚蜈支洲岛附近海域。当地的潜水员呢，多次拍摄到了斑海豹在海洋。
Wuzhezhou's good water quality and abundant fish resource were attributed as the reason that attracted this distinguished guest. In order to cope with the challenges brought by coral reef degradation, scientists from all over the world are working together to tackle the issue. Wuzhezhou Island's initial success attracted the attention of many foreign researchers. Southeast Asian countries also have rich marine resources and are increasingly paying attention to marine biodiversity protection and sustainable development in recent years. Li Bin, Vice President of the Malaysian Aquatic Products Merchants Association, is now in contact with Professor Wang Aimin's team, hoping to introduce China's technology to build a marine ranch similar to the Wuzhezhou Island model in Malaysia to restore their local coral reefs.
China is ahead of the curve in coral reef restoration. We'd like to have cooperation with China on both academic and economic fields. By this, I mean real concrete cooperation.
China has 38,000 square kilometers of coral reefs, mainly distributed in the South China Sea. According to coral biologist Huang Hui, who's also head of the coral reef branch of the Pacific Society of China, China's coastal coral reef degradation trend has been largely contained in recent years, thanks to strict measures the country has taken. She says coral reef restoration efforts also helped a lot, but more efforts are still needed.
Our control measures are strict and effective, but how do we keep up the work? Can we persist with these measures? We need to manage it well and put protection measures in place.
Today, Wang Aimin's research team has expanded from the previous 4 to more than 50 people, bringing together a large number of people who love the ocean and corals like him. For Wang Aimin, marine ranching is a field of research for today, and also for a long time in the future.
For us marine researchers, there are still many unknowns that beckon us to study further.
Corals can be categorized into 2 types, hard corals and soft corals. Professor Wang Peizheng of Hainan Tropical Ocean University is an expert in the field of soft coral research and an old friend of Wang Aimin. His team will soon join the construction of Wuzhezhou Marine Ranch.
In our lab, we have about 20 to 30 types of soft corals. We mainly cultivate about 10 types that can be artificially propagated. We shall see if these 10 types can be used in ecological restoration.
Professor Li Xiaobao, a coral restoration expert at Hainan University, is conducting research on coral breeding. He is also a member of Professor Wang Aimin's team.
This year, we collected some corals in the wild and brought them back to the laboratory for monitoring. For the first time, we managed to successfully collect sperm and eggs from corals and fertilize them naturally. They are currently being cultured in the lab.
Although the tiny coral polyps seem insignificant to the ocean, they carry a lot of hope for the future. To protect the marine environment, the efforts of scientists alone are far from enough. The future of the ocean requires everyone to work together. Liu Zhenxing, a diver on Wuzhezhou Island, has been working here for 22 years. Picking up marine garbage while diving is a daily routine for him and his colleagues.
We all do it. There is a saying amongst divers here that one more diver means one more ocean protector.
To cultivate more coral lovers, Wuzhezhou Island has also launched a public activity for tourists to experience planting corals. Now, more and more tourist divers have begun to understand how they can help protect corals, like this tourist.
You can't use sunscreen, it'll harm the corals.
And this kid learning snorkeling.
I saw a lot of fish and corals. The coach also helped me plant a coral, and I took photos with the corals and the fish.
During his time on Wuzhezhou Island, Professor Wang Aimin always gets up early and climbs to the highest rock on the island to watch the sunrise. Under the sparkling sea, there is his most proud treasure.
This island is surrounded by fish reefs. From here, all the area you see that's being illuminated by the sun is our marine ranch.
In Professor Wang Aimin's mind, the most important thing now is to make more people aware of the importance of the ocean and coral reefs, and let more people know how they can protect corals, the little architects of the underwater realms. The professor said that if one day he becomes too old to dive, he will take more kids here to see the marine ranch and tell them stories about the sea and corals.
I want the sea to be clean and teeming with fish.
We need to protect the sea.
Make it more beautiful, bluer, and sparkling.
With that, we conclude this episode of Footprints. I'm Bob Jones. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in hearing more about the lives of ordinary but incredible people in China, follow us on Apple Podcasts. Just key in Footprints and you can find more stories anytime, anywhere. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.